Do you remember turning your radio dial late at night, praying to catch that one forbidden track? Back then, rock was a dangerous game. Today, we are ripping the lid off the censorship. You will discover how a messy hotel room chant earned its singer a massive FBI file, which legendary band was censored just for dropping a soda brand, and wait until you hear the 8-minute musical indictment that actually rescued a man from prison. These are brutal battles for artistic freedom. Today, we are counting down 10 the most banned rock songs of all time. January 1968. Number 10. Born to be Wild by Steppenwolf. Born to be wild. Picture a dusty highway and a beat-up used Ford Falcon. Yes, a Ford Falcon. The ultimate biker anthem did not actually start on two wheels. Writer Mars Bonfire penned this as a slow ballad after buying his first car, but nobody wanted it. Steppenwolf only recorded it because they were desperate for one last track to finish their debut album. Producer Gabriel Meckler threw out the soft edges. He layered Goldie McJohn's gritty Hammond organ over distorted guitars. They created a menacing wall of sound that felt like it was tearing out of your radio speakers. It shot up to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. But while the kids bought the records, the authorities panicked. Conservative radio stations quietly restricted its airplay. They were terrified this raw energy would incite riots and promote lawless biker gangs. To them, it was a threat to civil obedience. Ironically, by trying to suppress it, the establishment just made it cooler. When it became the heartbeat of the movie Easy Rider in 1969, its outlaw status was set in stone. This song earns its spot on our banned list not because of a government decree, but because of the genuine fear it struck into polite society. And let us be honest, the joke was on the censors. By singing the phrase heavy metal thunder, Steppenwolf accidentally gave a name to an entire musical genre that would give parents headaches for decades. They gave a generation feeling the weight of the draft a 3-minute escape, a reminder that sometimes you just need to start the engine and leave the rules behind. Before we move on to the next song, let me know where you're watching from. You might be surprised to discover that many people near you share the same love for these timeless classics. Number 9. Light My Fire by The Doors, 1967. Let us go back to September 1967. Live television had no safety net. There was no broadcast delay. Millions of families were gathered around their wooden TV sets on a Sunday night, holding their breath to see what these unpredictable new rock stars would do on The Ed Sullivan Show. The funny thing is, the most dangerous song in America started as a simple homework assignment. Jim Morrison yelled at his bandmates for being lazy and told them to write something. Guitarist Robbie Krieger went home and penned a love song. He did not even intend for the line, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher," to be about drugs. But when you combined John Densmore's Latin beat with Ray Manzarek's classical organ, the sound became elegant, yet completely threatening to the older generation. Network executives were terrified. Sullivan demanded they change the word higher to better, fearing it promoted illegal substances. The band smiled, nodded, and agreed to the censorship during rehearsal. But when the red camera light blinked on for the live, nationwide broadcast, Morrison looked dead into the lens and belted out the original lyric anyway. The producers were furious. Sullivan banned the Doors from his stage forever. When a producer yelled that they would never do the Ed Sullivan Show again, Morrison coldly replied, "Man, we just did Ed Sullivan." That single act of televised rebellion shot the track straight to number 1. They were not just banned from a TV show. They drew a line in the sand. It was the exact moment the youth of the 60s realized they did not have to play by the polite rules of the 50s anymore. Number 8. A Day in the Life by the Beatles, 1967.
And though the news was rather sad.
Imagine a single piano chord ringing out for 42 seconds. It sounds like the end of the world, or maybe just the end of an innocence. But before we get to that famous ending, let us look at how this puzzle was built. John Lennon was just sitting around reading the morning paper. He noticed a brief, tragic story about a fatal car crash and a silly survey about potholes in Blackburn. Ordinary, empty news. He wrote a gentle, mournful melody. Meanwhile, Paul McCartney had a completely different, upbeat scrap of a song about rushing to catch the bus. They decided to glue them together.
Nobody was really sure if he was from the house of law.
To bridge these two opposite pieces, producer George Martin brought in 40 classical musicians. He gave them a terrifying instruction. Start at your lowest note and climb to the highest note, without listening to the person next to you. The result was a chaotic, beautiful masterpiece that closed the Sgt. Pepper's album. But the BBC did not care about the art. They sent a formal letter banning the song entirely.
Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb.
Why the ban? They were terrified of the line, "I'd love to turn you on." The authorities thought it was a cheap invitation to use illegal substances. They completely missed the point. John was not offering a drug thrill. He was begging a numb, disconnected society to wake up and feel something real. Looking back, the contrast is almost funny. In 1967, a national broadcaster sent a formal document to silence this track. Today, that very same song is celebrated freely as perhaps the greatest pop recording in history. They gave a generation permission to question the mundane routine of life. And that final, thunderous piano chord, it still breaks our hearts today. Number 7. Come Together by the Beatles, 1969. It is almost comical to think that the biggest band on earth was censored, not for starting a political riot, but for accidentally dropping a soda brand. Before it became a swampy, heavy blues jam, John Lennon actually wrote this as a campaign jingle. It was meant for Timothy Leary, the guru running for governor of California. When Leary went to prison, Lennon kept the slogan, but completely mutated the song. In the studio, Paul McCartney noticed the early take sounded dangerously close to a Chuck Berry tune. To hide the evidence, they slowed the tempo way down, giving it that menacing groove. It shot straight to number 1 in the United States. But back in England, the BBC dropped the hammer and issued a strict broadcast ban. Why? Simply because Lennon sang the phrase, "He shoot Coca-Cola." The network had a rigid rule against free advertising.
Over me.
This is why this track holds such a hilarious spot on our list. While other artists were silenced for pushing social boundaries, the Beatles were banned for a commercial technicality. It shows how painfully out of touch the authorities were at the end of the decade. Yet while the suits worried about soda ads, millions of fans sat in their bedrooms, playing the vinyl over and over. They treated it like a sacred ritual, trying to decode the bizarre lyrics to figure out which verse described which Beatle. They could stop the broadcast, but they could never stop the obsession. What happens when the biggest television show in America tries to put a leash on the ultimate bad boys of rock and roll? Number 6. Let's Spend the Night Together by the Rolling Stones, 1967. Before the television drama, the studio session itself was already a circus. While they were recording at RCA Studios in Hollywood, 2 police officers randomly showed up to check on the noise. Producer Andrew Loog Oldham coolly borrowed their headsets and kept working as if nothing happened. The track was pure, unapologetic adrenaline. But the real trouble started when they took it to the Ed Sullivan Show. The title was far too suggestive for conservative America. Sullivan gave them a strict ultimatum: change the lyrics or get off his stage. Unlike the Doors, who flat out refused later that year, the Stones agreed to a compromise. They promised to sing, "Let us spend some time together." But Mick Jagger was not about to surrender quietly. When the red camera light went on, he sang the censored words, but deliberately rolled his eyes so dramatically that the whole country felt the sarcasm. He turned a forced moment of submission into a legendary act of televised defiance. It was a brilliant, passive-aggressive middle finger to the establishment. Radio stations across the USA still avoided playing the track, pushing it down the charts. Yet looking back, that night on Sullivan remains a heavy cultural milestone. It would be the final time founding member Brian Jones ever appeared on that stage before his tragic, untimely death. The band survived the censorship, but the colorful innocence of the 60s was rapidly fading away. If you're still watching, leave a comment with the number 6. I'll know I'm sharing these unforgettable rock memories with a true Rolling Stones fan. Number 5. Give Peace a Chance by Plastic Ono Band. 1969. Remember that massive FBI file I promised to tell you about earlier? This simple, repetitive chant is the culprit. It was not born in a fancy $1 million studio. John Lennon and Yoko Ono were staging their second bed-in for peace at a hotel in Montreal. When a frustrated reporter asked what they were actually trying to achieve by staying in bed, Lennon just blurted out the phrase. To capture the moment, they dragged mattresses onto the floor and invited a local engineer. The room turned into a messy, chaotic choir, featuring everyone from Timothy Leary to a group of Hare Krishnas clapping along. It sounded completely naive, but the establishment was terrified. They did not just issue a standard radio ban. The government took a much darker route. When 500,000 protesters gathered in Washington and chanted those exact words, the authorities realized how dangerous a simple prayer could be. The FBI opened a massive surveillance file on Lennon. They tracked his every move for years, desperately searching for an excuse to kick him out of the country. They did not just try to stop a record from spinning on the radio, they tried to break the man who wrote it. Yet, in the middle of a brutal, confusing war, John gave a bleeding world a beautiful moment of hope, a feeling that no government agency could ever erase. Number 4. Eve of Destruction by Barry Maguire, 1965. The most terrifying protest song of the decade was not carefully crafted in a pristine studio. It was a rough demo. Writer P.F. Sloan was only 19 years old when he poured all the anxiety of a generation into these lyrics. When Barry Maguire stepped up to the microphone, he was exhausted. He was literally reading the words off a crumpled piece of paper. It was never meant to be the final version. But a rough mix leaked to a local radio station.
Don't you understand what I'm trying to say?
His raspy, unpolished voice perfectly captured the raw fear of kids waiting for a nuclear flash. But conservative broadcasters panicked. Stations in Chicago, Washington, and even the BBC banned it outright. They branded it as anti-American propaganda that would ruin national morale and aid the enemy. But you cannot hide the brutal truth from young men facing the military draft. The censorship backfired spectacularly. The attempt to suffocate the track only turned it into an immortal student anthem. It shot straight to number 1 on the Billboard charts. actually knocking the Beatles out of the top spot. It is heartbreaking to look back and realize the establishment tried to bury a 19-year-old kid's warning about war and hate. They called it a threat. Yet look at the world right now. Almost 60 years later, the lyrics feel like they were written this very morning. The band failed, but the real tragedy is, we are still standing on that exact same edge.
We're on the eve of destruction.
Number 3, For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield, 1967.
I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody...
Most people think this is the ultimate anti-war anthem about Vietnam. Truth is, Stephen Stills wrote it in about 15 minutes regarding a street fight right in his own neighborhood. The local government put a 10 p.m. curfew on the Sunset Strip to stop kids from hanging out at a music club. That is it. No global politics, just teenagers wanting to listen to rock and roll, and the police showing up with batons to stop them. To capture that creeping anxiety in the studio, engineer Stan Ross created that famous ticking heartbeat sound by simply rubbing a drum brush against a guitar pick. Add Neil Young's haunting harmonics, and the track felt like a ticking time bomb. Conservative radio stations actively avoided playing it. They deemed it too political, too dangerous for the airwaves. But the kids found it anyway. One local station actually broke their regular format just to take live phone calls from teenagers trapped in the riot on the street.
Singing songs and to carry inside.
The establishment tried to quietly sweep this song under the rug. Instead, it became the universal soundtrack for a generation constantly clashing with authority. Looking back, it breaks your heart to realize that in that crowd of kids getting handcuffed, some of whom were future Hollywood legends like Jack Nicholson, they really just wanted a place to dance. The authorities silenced a neighborhood, but they accidentally woke up the whole country.
It starts when you're always afraid.
Number 2, Sky Pilot by Eric Burdon and the Animals, 1968. Sometimes the heaviest censorship comes from the church, not the state. Eric Burdon was sitting at home watching the evening news. He saw footage of military chaplains, known in soldier slang as sky pilots, blessing young men just before sending them into the jungle to die. It bothered him deeply. He wondered how a person could preach love and peace, and then bless the weapons of war. He poured that dark frustration into a sprawling 7-minute epic. Because of its massive length, the studio had to split the track across both sides of a vinyl record. In the middle section, Burdon layered actual audio of screaming fighter jets, explosions, and a Scottish bagpipe melody. Legend has it, he secretly recorded those bagpipes from a local school band, which supposedly earned him a stern warning letter from the British government.
The order is given, they move down the line.
Religious groups were furious. They called it blasphemy, to question a holy man's place in a war zone. Broadcasters across the country quietly pulled it off the airwaves. But you know who did not complain? The returning veterans. They had lived it. They had stood in the dirt, received those blessings, and watched their friends fall anyway. To those young men coming home with invisible scars, this band song was not an insult. It was a rare, comforting acknowledgement of their pain. In a world that wanted to look away, Eric Burdon made sure their truth was heard. Number 1, Hurricane by Bob Dylan, 1975. This is not just a song. It is an 8-minute criminal indictment broadcast over the radio. Bob Dylan wrote this masterpiece after reading the autobiography of Reuben Hurricane Carter, a boxer locked in a cage for a triple murder he did not commit. Dylan visited the prison, looked into the eyes of a man destroyed by a biased system, and decided the world had to know the truth. The studio sessions were a legal nightmare. The lawyers at Columbia Records were absolutely terrified. The original lyrics named real witnesses, accusing them of robbing the bodies right at the crime scene. Fearing massive defamation lawsuits, they forced Dylan to re-record the entire track from scratch. He sped up the tempo, letting Scarlett Rivera drive the melody with her relentless, piercing violin. It felt less like a rock track and more like a breathless crime thriller on your radio dial. Conservative radio stations flat out refused to play it. Explicitly calling out corrupt cops and prosecutors by name was simply too dangerous. They called it defamatory and subversive. But the censorship failed. The youth passed cassette tapes around, turning it into an unstoppable anthem for justice. It breaks your heart to think about the 22 years Carter lost in that cell. But the music actually worked. Dylan threw a benefit concert, keeping the story alive. A decade later, a federal judge ruled the trial was based on racial prejudice, and Reuben Carter walked out a free man. A banned song did not just make history, it actually saved a life. Looking back, it is wild to think about a chaotic hotel room choir terrifying the FBI, or the biggest band on earth being silenced over a soda brand. And of course, an 8-minute violin thriller actually rescuing a man from a prison cell. These are not just band records. They are reminders that true rock was never meant to be polite. You can ban the broadcast, but you can never silence the truth. If you want to keep this musical time machine running, hit that subscribe button. Now I want to know, which of these censorship stories shocked you the most today? Tell me down in the comments. Until next time, keep the record spinning.